In this 3D scene, I've used a specific feature in Blender to make it look like this instead of this. I'm talking about vertex groups, which are custom selections of vertices on a 3D mesh, which we can use to limit procedural effects of modifiers, geometry nodes, physics, particles, bones, and other things, which would otherwise affect the entire 3D object. In this video, let's take a closer look at how to work with vertex groups, how to adjust them in weight paint mode, and a couple of practical examples. Hi everyone, Reinhardt here for cgboost.com, and now let's jump into the fun. The most basic use case of vertex groups is to store selections. As example, let's create 3 vertex groups for this little suit for the arms, body and the legs. And for this, let's tap into edit mode. Here it doesn't really matter if you have vertex, edge or face selection enabled. It will always group the vertices which are connected to the faces, edges or the individual vertices. Here in the object data tab under vertex groups, we can add or remove vertex groups. Here you can see I created this deformation vertex group already, which you can fully ignore right now. To create a new vertex group, let's click the plus icon here, and if you want to remove one, you can click the minus. In this case, let's create 3 new vertex groups, and with double click we can rename them. Let's call the first one body, then hit tab, the second arms, and then tab legs and enter to confirm. Now to add vertices to a specific vertex group, make sure the right vertex group is selected. In this case, let's start with the body, and then you can see these red lines here. That means I already created seams for the texturing process, which we now can use for limiting the selection. Let's press L above the body. Now it will select everything, but if we open up this panel down here, we can set the delimit method, in this case to seam, to use the seams to limit our selection. Now only the body is selected, as you can see, however not here at the back. Let's press L once again, and now I have all the vertices I want to pack into the body vertex group. Simply select it and then click assign. Then let's press Alt A. With L, let's select the arms, select the arm vertex group, hit assign, and with Alt A deselect the arms, and then let's select the 2 legs here and assign them to the legs vertex group. Now with Alt A, let's deselect everything, and now we can easily select or deselect the vertex groups up here by using the select button or the deselect button. If you want to remove vertices from a specific vertex group, simply select the specific area. Maybe I want to remove this arm from the arms vertex group. Then simply select the vertex group and then click on remove. And now, if I select the arms vertex group, you can see only the one arm will be selected. And then if you want to change the order of the vertex groups, you can select a vertex group here and then just move it up and down with these little arrows here. If you click this arrow, you also find more options like sorting all vertex groups by name, duplicating a vertex group, or just deleting all vertex groups at once. Then you can see up here the deformation vertex group, which I created earlier, is currently locked. That means you can't assign new vertices or remove existing vertices. And you can easily lock or unlock your vertex groups by clicking the locker icon here. And then we have this weight value here, but to better understand this, let's have a look at a different example. By the way, if you want to follow along, you can download all project files for this tutorial in our resource section. There you also find our handy shortcut PDF, which we always update with major Blender releases. Watch our free Blender beginner course and our free Blender sculpting course and much more. It's completely free, only an email is required to sign up. Check out the link in the video description. For creating this safety balloon here for the space capsule, I just created a subdivided plane and added a bunch of modifiers. When I disable all the modifiers here and go to edit mode, you can see it's a flat object, and only through the solidify modifier it was thickened. I added some subdivisions and smoothness using the subsurf modifier, and with the displace modifier I added these nice surface details here. However, this wouldn't look as nice if I wouldn't use a vertex group. Here in the displace modifier, for example, we can see this vertex group field, and whenever you see an empty field with this little icon here, you can click inside and pick a vertex group from the vertex group groups which you already added to the object. With the little X you can remove vertex groups, and with the little arrow here you can invert the vertex group. And you can see without the vertex group the whole thing looks kinda weird, because this specific vertex group defines that the strength up here should be weaker than down here. And this we define using the vertex weight. Let's re-add the thickness vertex group. And by the way, I added the same vertex group up here to the solidify modifier, which controls the general thickness of this object. So let's re-add the vertex group, and let's go over to the object data vertex groups. Here we find the thickness vertex group. And whenever we assign vertices to a specific group, we can define the vertex weight. That means how much weight a vertex should have on a specific group, or in other words, how much influence. We can define the value between 0 and 1. 1 means 100% and 0 means nothing. And so to speak, all the vertices of an object are automatically in all vertex groups which we are creating, but there the vertex weight is 0. That means when we remove vertices from a group, all we are really doing is setting the vertex weight for this specific group to 0. And in this case, since the vertex group is connected to the different modifiers, you can see how the whole object is now flat, since we basically disabled the modifiers on the entire object. And now in order to apply different vertex weights, we can simply select a bunch of vertices. Let's start down here. Let's leave the vertex weight at 1 for now and then hit assign. Now these vertices here have a vertex weight of 1. Let's go to the next line and lower this and then hit assign again. Now here we only have 90% influence in this vertex group. Here let's go to 0.8 and hit assign. Then we have only 80% influence. And now let's quickly continue this process. Now you can see this nice gradient from thinner to thicker here towards the end. However, when we are clicking on the vertices, we can't really see the vertex weight because this value only defines the weight when we assign new vertices to a vertex group. However, we can press N, and up here under item we find the vertex weight, which shows us the vertex weight for the current active selected vertex. And you can see over here we had a vertex value of 1, and here it's only 0.9, 0.8, 0.7 and so on and so forth. And we can also see in what vertex groups this specific vertex is. So when I select this one vertex down here and create another vertex group, maybe set the vertex weight to 0.5 and assign it, then you can see over here this specific vertex is now in 2 different vertex groups with 2 different vertex weights. We could even change the vertex weight for this one vertex over here, or remove it from a vertex group entirely. Let's get rid of this one vertex group and let's press N, because there is a much better way to visualize the vertex weight. Let's go up here to the mesh edit mode overlays and enable vertex group weights. And now we get this nice colorful gradient on the surface, which is basically a heat map. That means where the color is the hottest, we have the strongest weight value, and where the color is the coldest, we have the lowest weight value. That means a weight value of 0 is dark blue, and a weight value of 1 is red, and the gradient over orange, yellow, green, and light blue are the different values in between. Now, if you ask me, selecting individual vertices, picking a specific weight value and then hitting assign is very tedious. Just imagine you have thousands of vertices on your object. Let's undo this. And this is why we have the weight paint mode. First of all, let's quickly disable the vertex group weights overlays, because as soon as we switch over to weight paint mode, we can see this nice heat map by default. However, up here in the weight paint overlays, you can change the opacity, and we can also enable show wire, which is quite useful to better understand where we have different vertices. And the weight paint mode, as you guessed it, allows us to paint the weight directly and dynamically onto the surface, which is much more convenient. Let's quickly undo this. Let's press T, and here we have a bunch of tools. By the way, if you can't see the names over here, just go to the right side until this little double arrow appears, left click and hold, and then you can drag this to the inside or to the outside to either get only the icons or the icons and names. And first of all, let's stay here with the draw tool and let's have a quick look at the most important settings up here. First of all, we have the weight value here, which is the maximum weight we can apply while painting on the surface. Right now this is set to 1. That means when I draw above the surface a couple of times, at some point we will reach the maximum of 1, defined by the red color here. And if I set this to 0.5, for example, we can only reach 0.5 maximum. And you can see if the weight value is higher, it will reduce the weight, and if it's lower, it will increase the weight when we are painting. Let's set it back to 1. Next we have the radius, which defines the size of our brush. We can either change it up here, or we can simply press F in the 3D viewport, move our mouse left and right, and left click to confirm. And then we have the strength, which defines how much weight we apply with each brush stroke. And no matter what I set up here, it will only go to the maximum weight which we set up over here. So for example, if I set this to 1, so I apply the full strength with each brush stroke, but set the weight value to 0.5, I will only apply a weight of 0.5, but immediately with each brush stroke. But when I set this to 1 and the strength to 0.2, for example, I will only add a weight of 0.2 with each brush stroke. So I have to paint a couple of times until I reach the maximum value which I set up over here. And this is also the usual setup I use. I set the weight to 1 and lower the strength quite a bit, because then I can carefully paint the weight onto the surface, and while holding down Control, I can invert the whole thing, meaning I can carefully remove the weight. So, and in this way we can clearly define that up here the weight should be relatively low, and maybe here at the center it should be relatively strong, and maybe over here let's reduce it a bit more. And you can see how much more fun this is painting in the weight by using the weight paint mode. Then we have different tools like blurring the whole thing, which we can also do when having the draw tool enabled and just holding down Shift. Then we can paint the average. So it's basically taking a certain radius here, and then it paints the average value inside this radius. Let's draw a little bit over here, and then with the smear tool we can smear the weight into different directions. And what I find really useful is the gradient feature here, which allows us to click and drag to draw a gradient in a specific direction. Let's go back to the draw tool, and we have a bunch of more options over here, but this would go too far for this tutorial here. A few things to note: you can symmetrize what you are painting over here. When you're using a graphics tablet with a pen, you can enable pressure sensitivity for the radius and the strengths here to make the painting process more dynamic. And up here you can also switch to different vertex groups if you don't have the vertex group panel enabled over here. That means if I create a new vertex group, you can see that the weight is set to 0 by default, and now I could start painting a different vertex weight for this specific vertex group. And now if I go back to the thickness vertex group, you can see that it shows the specific vertex weight inside this group. So these are the basics of the vertex groups and the weight paint mode, and now let's have a look at a couple of more examples. As a very basic example on how to use vertex groups to limit the effect of certain effects, in this case a simulation, let's have a look at this little flag here. And of course, when I play the animation, it should blow in the wind. For this, I added a wind force field, which you can add with Shift A, force field wind. And in the physics properties, I increased the strength quite a bit. For the flag object, in edit mode, you can see it has quite some subdivisions. And I added a subsurf and a solidify modifier, so the flag has a bit of thickness here. Then in the physics tab, I added the cloth simulation, and in the modifiers, I made sure that the cloth modifier, which then will be added, is on top of the modifier stack. So this will be calculated first, and then the other modifiers are after. Now, if I play the simulation, you can see the flag just flies away. That means in this case, we want to use a vertex group to disable the cloth simulation on different spots. For this, let's switch to edit mode. Let's select these two vertices here, go to the object data tab, vertex groups. Let's create a new vertex group, call it pin, and then hit assign. Now we created a vertex group, but we still need to tell the cloth simulation to now exclude this specific vertex group. For this, let's tab back to object mode, go to the physics tab, and here under shape, we can find the pin group. Now let's click in here, and now it shows us all the vertex groups which are on this specific mesh, and in this case, we only have the pin vertex group. And now, if I play back the simulation, everything works as it should. And now to also play a bit with the vertex weight, let's select the flag, go into edit mode. With Alt A, deselect everything, and with C, let's select these here, right click, go back to our vertex groups, and now let's set the weight down to 0.5 and then assign. So we added these vertices here to the pin group, but with only a weight of 0.5, meaning 50%. And since we are still having our pin group enabled here, we just added these vertices to the cloth simulation. And now if I play back the simulation, you can see that this portion above here is a bit more stiff because the cloth simulation only has 50% effect on these vertices. One of the most important use cases for vertex groups is in the rigging process when binding a mesh to the bones. Here we have this slimy alien tentacle, and now let's create a simple armature. The 3D cursor is down here, so let's hit Shift A, armature, and add a single bone. In the viewport displays, let's enable in front so we can see the little bone down here, and set the display as to wire so we can see through the bone. Tap into edit mode, the tip here is selected, so let's press G, Z, move it up to the top, and then select the center, right click subdivide, and let's keep it simple, let's subdivide it 2 times so we have 3 different bones. Then in the armature settings over here, in the viewport displays, let's enable names so we can see the names of the different bones here. And let's change the display as to B bones so the bones have this more rectangle shape. And if we quickly switch over to pose mode, now when I press R we have this harsh bending between these bones, but when I select all the bones, go to the bone settings, and here under bendy bones, hold down Alt and let's increase the segments to something like 6. We get these additional segments, and when I rotate a bone you can see there's this soft transition between these bones. Now all there's left to do is to bind the mesh to the bones. For this let's go back into object mode, select the tentacle, then with Shift the armature, and press Ctrl P to open up the parent menu. Here under armature deform we can either choose with empty groups, that means it will create an empty vertex group for each bone, then we manually have to paint in the vertex weights in weight paint mode, or we can choose with automatic weights, then Blender will create vertex groups for each bone and automatically calculates the vertex weights based on the bone position. And in most cases I would choose this option because it means less work for us. Now select the armature with Shift the mesh, and then let's switch over to weight paint mode. Now we are automatically in the bone select option here, and with Alt left click we can select the different bones, and you can see the connected vertex group here in the background with the different vertex weights. And you can see Blender did a pretty good job at adding most of the vertices to the bone. You can see it on the red color, and at the transition over to the next bone it has a soft transition in the vertex weights. So that means both bones here deforming this area in between. And now if we go to the vertex groups here, you can see it created a vertex group for each of the 3 bones with the same name. And now we can go in here and check if the deformation is good, which is the case here. But if this wouldn't be the case, we can use the weight paint mode as I showed you before. So we can go in here and adjust the vertex weight or remove the vertex weight as we like. But since this looks pretty good, we don't really have to do anything. One thing to keep in mind though, let's go back to object mode, let's select the armature and let's tap into edit mode. Let's select one of the bones and press F2 to rename it and maybe remove the 2 zeros here. And now in object mode, let's go back to the mesh and you can see the name of the vertex group was also changed. However, when I go in here and change the name of the vertex group, this change will not apply to the bone. And when both the bone and the vertex group have different names, then they will not be connected anymore. That means if I now go here into pose mode and try to rotate it, you can see it will not move the top portion anymore. However, if I rename this bone back into bone 001 and rotate it, you can see the vertex group is connected again. That means as long as a vertex group and the bone has the same name, they are connected. Another way to use vertex groups is to control where particles should emit, or in this case where hair particles should grow. Here on this tentacle you can see the hair is only growing on top, but here it's growing all over the place. And in order to generate the hair, I created a simple particle system. Here let's go over to the hair particle settings, and down here we find the vertex groups. And here you can see you can enter vertex groups to limit different settings of the hair particles. However, before we can use a vertex group, we have to create a vertex group. So let's go to the object data settings, and here as you can see we have a bunch of vertex groups which are connected to the different bones here to deform the tentacle, but we are missing a vertex group for the hair. So let's create a new one, double click, call it hair, and right now it's completely empty. But before we paint the vertex weight, let's go to the particle settings and enter the hair vertex group for the density. That means we define where it should grow, and we can also use it for the length. That means the vertex weight defines how long the hair should be. And now let's switch to weight paint mode. Now everything is blue, as you can see, and now we can start painting here. And where I paint, the hair is growing, as you can see. So we can grow the hair, and the more weight I add, the longer the hair will be here. And of course we can also hold down Control to invert our brush, so we can also remove the hair. And by the way, if you want to see the final result, you can lower the opacity of the weight paint overlays here, and then you can paint the hair directly on the surface without getting interrupted by the weird weight map. This feels strangely satisfying. Another way to use a vertex group is to scatter objects on the surface by using a simple geometry node setup. Here, let's split our view and open up the geometry node editor. And here on the surface, I already created a simple node tree. Here I don't want to go into the details, but here you can see the node tree in full screen. Basically what we are doing is to scatter a collection of rocks onto points which are distributed on the ground. For the rotation and the scale we used some random values, and the density factor I connected with the group input, which allows me to use a vertex group when clicking on this button here. But before I need to set up a vertex group, let's go to the vertex groups and create a new one, which we call scatter. Then let's get out of the camera view, switch over to weight paint mode, and here again let's lower the opacity of the weight paint overlays to 0, and then let's go back to the modifiers and connect the scatter vertex group to the geometry node setup. And now we can start painting with a higher strength, and then the little rocks will start to appear here. And to make the viewport run a bit faster, let's disable one of the subsurf modifiers here with Control Space full screen the 3D viewport, and now we can paint a bit more fluent here. And let's actually get the overlays back again so we can better see how strong we are painting in specific areas. And as you can see, based on the geometry node setup, we will scatter little rocks where we paint the vertex group. So, and of course you can again hold down Control to invert it if you want to erase some of the rocks here once again. And then let's press numpad 0, disable all the overlays, and now we have little rocks scattered around here. As last use case for vertex groups, I want to show you how to create dynamic vertex groups. Here I created a very simple animation where the space capsule is landing, and with a dynamic vertex group I deform the ground underneath it. And if I quickly go to the ground here and switch over to weight paint mode and scrub through the animation, you can also see how the vertex group here is dynamically adjusting. For this setup, let's select the ground, tap into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then to add all the selected vertices into a new vertex group, simply hit Ctrl G and then assign to new group. Then you can see over here we created this new group. Let's double click and let's call it Deformation. Make sure the vertex weight is set to 1 when you assign all these vertices to this new group. Then let's tap back into object mode and let's go over to the modifiers. To create this dynamic effect, we need the vertex weight proximity modifier, which we can find under the edit category down here, or you just type in prox, which will open up the search dialog, and then you can click on this vertex weight proximity modifier. Here, first of all, we have to pick the vertex group which we want to dynamically adjust. Let's pick Deformation, and then we have to pick a target object which will dynamically adjust the vertex group. Here, let's click on this eyedropper and pick the space capsule. Then we can choose if we either want to use the object origin to create this proximity effect or the geometry. And in this case, let's go with the faces. Now, if we switch over to weight paint mode, you can already see the effect down here. Based on the position of the faces of the space capsule, it will now use a specific distance, in this case 1 meter, to alter the vertex group. And now when the space capsule is starting, you can see how this is dynamically adjusting the vertex group based on the distance. And now we can also increase the highest value to increase the radius, and we can also increase the lowest first value, which will increase the area where the vertex group is completely 0, as you can see. But let's set this back to 0 and lower the radius here a bit. Now let's switch back to object mode, and now we created a dynamic vertex group, which we can use in other modifiers now. Let's add the displace modifier, create a new displacement texture. Let's also call it deformation. Let's go to the texture settings, and up here let's pick the clouds, a procedural grayscale noise here, and based on the dark and bright spots, this will either push the vertices up or down. Down here you can adjust the texture more if you like. However, here I will just use the default values. Let's go back to the modifiers, and here we can now increase the strength of the displacement, and we can also change the mid level to push everything up or down. So, and now down here we can pick the deformation vertex group, which will now affect everything but the area underneath the space capsule. So we have to invert the vertex group by clicking this button here. And now we deform everything underneath the space capsule. So now you can increase or decrease the strength, and we can also push everything down to have a crater, or everything up to have this little hill here. And then if we add a subdivision surface modifier, we can smooth out the surface a bit more. So now when the space capsule is moving, or we can also manually grab it and move it around, you can see how the ground is dynamically adjusting. And if we switch over to the weight paint mode, you can also see it here dynamically. And now nothing is in the way of crashing the space capsule into the ground. Now you know what vertex groups are, what you can use them for, and how to use the weight paint mode. I hope you found this video helpful and learned something new. Let us know if you enjoyed the video and if you wish a deep dive into another subject. Remember, you can download the project files of this tutorial along with our shortcut PDF and free Blender courses in our resource section, linked below. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you don't want to miss the next video, don't forget to subscribe.